This podcast is a collaboration between Costard and Touchstone Productions and the Dads from the Crypt podcast. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the How Not to Make a Movie podcast. I'm Alan Katz.
And I'm Gil Adler. Welcome.
And today we're talking to a friend of mine. Gil had never met Sam Egan before. I worked with Sam for 2 seasons on The Outer Limits. Sam was the showrunner, the executive producer. And I had a wonderful experience working with and for Sam. He was my boss, in essence. Just a very calming, steadying, Zen kind of influence, as you'll see. There's a definite Zenness to Sam. He's had a very long career in television. He's really gone from really the days of Quincy to streaming series, and that's where Sam jumped off the ride, as he'll discuss. But television has changed so much over the course of Sam's career, but also our careers.
If you listen carefully, you'll learn a lot about where we think TV might be going. By learning about what happened in the past. Yeah,
indeed. With that in mind, here's Sam. For me, this is quite a glorious conversation. I mean, because Gil was my partner for 10 years, a very important person in my life. You ran the show that I was on for 2 years, and at a time when I needed a steadying influence, another writer as a steadying influence. In retrospect, you were the tonic I needed, Sam, at exactly the time that I needed it.
That's more than kind of you to say.
It is a fact of life, and I haven't had the chance to say it to you until now. And oh my God, thank goodness that's off my chest.
Well, we were in the trenches together. That makes for friendships.
It's when you sit in a writer's room together, and you break down story after story after story, and just the hours of staring at each other, like you say something, no, you say something. Yes, it an unusual kind of familial bond forms, unlike anything else.
And the only thing that I can add to that is, Sam, I was waiting. You never called.
Where did you? Or you live in Oakland now? Where did you start off your ride?
Oh, born in Germany. My parents were Holocaust survivors, and so I came to the U.S. very early in my life, about 3 years old.
So you were actually born in Germany after the war?
Yeah, of
course.
Although we had been to Israel first after, we were displaced people. So we found a place.
Indeed. We'll get to that part of your story. We'll save that for when we get to Tribunal and how you told the story.
Sure.
Down the road. When your family landed here, where did you land?
In Phoenix, Arizona. We were supposed to land in Alabama, and I came within a hair's breadth of winding up there. So I don't know what that would have meant.
Oh my God!
But it was
wouldn't have been pretty. I don't think it would have been pretty.
Oh my God!
No.
Oh geez.
Led probably at the age of 4.
Just what you needed to go from Germany to Alabama.
Yeah.
Holy shit! Oh my God. Okay. Well, you dodged that bullet. Thank goodness.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Phoenix. Okay.
And then on to LA after a few years.
Where'd you go to school?
Hollywood High School.
So eventually, so your whole family moved here.
Yes. Yeah. My whole family moved here. When I was still very young. So.
All right. So you grew up in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
I did not know this about you.
Yeah.
All right. All right. So naturally, then it makes sense that when writing suddenly, well, all right. Aside from writing, are you qualified to do anything else?
Uh, I'm not sure I'm even qualified to do writing, but I didn't know if
No,
I
well,
thought.
nah. That unfortunately, the evidence is completely against you.
Okay, well, I'll back up.
Uh,
But
I've always thought of myself that if not for writing, I would be in fact, occasionally I get paid for it. I'd be a complete burden on society.
I felt I was very capable as a writer before I entered any thought of doing it, and really, it was not a big first on my mind. I went to journalism school, but I didn't want to be a reporter. I didn't want to. I was kind of. It was, the Vietnam days and all that. So
What year did you start writing for Rolling Stone?
76 or so.
An interesting time to be writing at Rolling Stone.
Yeah, I was the only non-Stone person at Altamont, which was unusual for me, but it was just a happenstance. I was among many reporters who covered that
Yeah.
infamous event.
What was your vantage point of the most infamous part of that infamous event when the violence broke out?
It was very hard to decipher exactly what was happening, except as translated through Mick Jagger and telling people to cool out and then seeing the omnipresent Hell's Angels everywhere. But that's a whole other story. It won numerous journalistic awards.
Cool.
But remember, I was one of 50 writers. 50. So it poured in, unsolicited reporting poured in, mine among them. I got on the phone with this. I don't know if this is a diversion, but I got on the phone with
There are no diversions
who were negotiating for Altamont, and so I had all of this behind the scenes information, which at the time was of interest to the readers. Other than that, I was not like a stellar person at Rolling Stone. It was just a nice lucky bump in the road for me.
These are the bumps that
propel us mere inches.
So at the end of the day, you transition into TV. What was your first TV gig?
Officially, my first TV gig, Cliffhangers. Ken Johnson, the producer of The Hulk and V. It was the most expensive 1-hour show on television at the time. Bit of a fluke that I even got on the show. There's always a lucky break, and that was a genuine lucky break for me.
What was the fluke?
The fluke is I had no experience in writing for television other than this documentary,
which we'll come back to. We'll come back to in a second.
I got lucky. A friend of mine said they have money on the staff for this show because there were 3 different shows going at the same time. Why don't you come interview? Shortly thereafter came Quincy.
Let's jump back for a second. You wrote. Did you also have part of the production of the Imagine documentary about John Lennon?
Oh yeah, that was later.
That's afterwards. Oh, okay. So
I co-produced and co-wrote that show. I mean the film.
Yeah.
Warner Brothers.
It's lovely. It's fantastic.
Yeah, that year I had 2 other features out, believe it or not. And those were the only features I think in my resume. All 3 came that year.
Wow.
An embarrassment of riches and then nothing.
Yes and no.
Yeah. Well,
an embarrassment.
Some great TV credits. Quincy, yeah. The one that I'm fascinated by among your early credits is Manimal.
Oh my God.
You wrote an episode of Manimal. That's fantastic.
The shame. Yeah, I don't know how to justify that. I mean, but it was part of going over to Fox and Glenn Larson in those days. I knew it from the get-go that I was whoring. It was just, I could have made a better choice of what to do, but Glenn Larson had 7 shows on the air at that time, and he waved a contract at me, and I just jumped. So, but that was 3 years of remarkably interesting. But Manimal, yeah, that's the bottom, scraping the barrel. And Cover Up, there were some really tawdry. Can you do us? Because once you were working with Glenn Larson,
You're just you're a functionary. You're a widget maker in a sense. You were on Quincy for how many seasons?
4 seasons, the last 4 of the show.
And in those days, a season, those are old fashioned network seasons. What were
22 shows. And once I was there, I had my hand in 70% of the product, not credits necessarily, although I did write 22 so I guess I wrote 1 full season by myself.
Huh. Wow.
So that was absolutely immersion in the business and to the exclusion of anything sane or responsible.
Did Glenn Larson ever use his power of having 7 shows to entice you to work on this one as opposed to that one? Or if you said you wanted to
he gave me my pick of shows.
He did.
And I really had to think about it. He had a medical show on, and he had a spy show on, and he had a science fiction show on. Those were the 3. I said, okay, I'll take the medical show. And he said, I think that's staffed already. And then I said, I'll do the science fiction show. And that turned out to be kind of fun, but hardly a luminous credit.
Which show is that?
Automan. Automan is just a little cult thing you can look up, but it was from the producers of Tron.
It sucks to be ahead of the curve.
Yeah, it does, especially when visual effects were so fucking lame.
Yeah.
And yet so difficult for production.
You did a season of Snoops.
That was the show that made me leave LA. So actually my wife made me leave LA.
But the show helped.
The show really helped.
What
it was
Sam,
just so
what happened? What happened? What'd they do to you?
I can sum it up in an image. I was at a mix till 1 a.m, and my car was parked all the way across the Universal lot, which is a long walk, and you have to go to Spielberg country. 1 a.m, and I'm walking, and I felt like my legs wouldn't carry me anymore. And that became a recurring dream after that. It was so fucking hard to do and so thankless. And I say that with total respect for Tim Reed and Daphne Reed, who were the stars and understandably had a lot of sway on the show. It was more the studio and the actual difficulty of delivering shows that studios are happy with, that the stars are happy with. And everyone who's written for television understands that cross to bear. So kind of built into the system.
It's hard to explain to people what it's like when the notes come in.
I always used to say, you have no idea how hard it is to do bad television. I mean, it's impossibly hard. I mean, to do good television, I guess, is harder, or maybe not. Maybe I've done both. I've enjoyed one certainly more than the other, which is making good television.
So is it possible that had the producers been wise enough to give you a parking space much closer,
that could have made all the difference?
We'd be having a different conversation.
You see, it's a whole different world based on where did I park my car.
And if that wasn't it, it's pecking order measured one way or another, right?
You said it.
Yeah.
So you leave LA. A show called Tropical Heat is that the first time you work up in Canada?
Well, that wasn't in Canada. That was shot all over the world.
So is Outer Limits the first show that you did in Canada?
Yes.
Huh. All right, then we'll come to that. You also did a great show called Northern Exposure.
That was a highlight of. If you think of the roller coaster that most writers' careers are, lucky enough to be. There are highlights and there are lowlights, and you can laugh about the lowlights, but you can really savor what was really fun and authentic and wonderful collaborative atmosphere. And it was just one season, but I did 5 of the shows that season and co-produced the season.
I must tell you, that's one of my wife's and my favorite shows ever. You know, there was something not only emotionally direct about the relationship of the characters, but there was something spiritual that came across that was just different than anything else on television then.
I completely agree. I would, and I had nothing to do with the show's creation or its development, but when I got there, the table was set so beautifully. It was a joy to contribute to it.
Outer Limits.
Outer Limits.
All right.
I have a question for you first. Does it
Yeah.
madden you when you mention the Outer Limits that everybody thinks of a show in the 1950s and thinks you must be 120 years old?
No, just me. I think he's 120 years old, but I thought that years ago.
Of course. Anyway, go ahead. Go ahead. I'm interrupting my interviewer.
Outer Limits is a strange show. Having done a couple of anthologies in my time, Tales from the Crypt, Freddy's Nightmares, Gil and I did that anthology. I can tell you very easily what Tales from the Crypt's franchise was. Very easy to point to what the Nightmare on Elm Street series, what the franchise was. I could not I worked on that show for 2 seasons. I couldn't tell you what the franchise was. And here's the thing that I know. I don't know what the franchise is. I wrote like 8 episodes, I think, over the course of my 2 seasons, and I didn't write a single one of the control voices. You wrote every one of those. I had no idea how to write that, because every time I would go to start to write, I had no idea who it was. I could not get inside a character's framework to begin to frame a thought as to, well, how do I feel about this? What's my attitude about whatever it is the episode was about? I couldn't formulate anything. It was such a dead end to me. And you would reel them off like that.
Because I'm an ad man at heart.
Oh my God. It blew me away because, and I didn't know how to ask the question. This came later in life as I figured more shit out. Yeah, you understood that show's franchise.
There's a distinction between being profound and being perceived as profound. And the skill for doing those bookends was the percept. They go, oh, I get it, or do I? But yeah, I'm flattered by you bringing that up. But it was a show to heart because they kept moving the goalposts for one thing.
Huh.
What qualified as sci-fi and not edging into horror or fantasy.
Hiring me didn't help that, Eddie.
Oh, it helped tremendously.
I was not a sci-fi guy.
No, but neither was I when I got the job at all. I wasn't a sci-fi reader or writer particularly. I had written a spec sci-fi script. And actually one that got made. That's one of the 3 features. But other than that, I had not really thought of myself in any way as a sci-fi writer. So you were in good company. The thing about an anthology, and the thing about one that is a true anthology that has just a few parameters around it, is that you have to reinvent the wheel every week, for better or worse. And it was like making a little movie every week.
Yeah.
So you had some of the more imaginative little movies in your head. Yeah. And it really made for a couple of really strong seasons, I thought.
The writer's room was quite remarkable. The brain power, we had a guy named Narain Shankar was,
yeah,
and Narain went on to write all of the
CSI.
The CSI.
He's got a series on the air now, streaming, and he's been busy ever since.
Prolific. I mean,
and such a wonderful man too.
He was a huge Simpsons fan, and it was always like Homer Simpson was there in the writers' room with us. As we sat around the writers' room, we all agreed early on the dumbest thing you could want to tell is a time travel story.
Yeah.
And the second season that I was on the show, Narain came and pitched me a time travel story, which we ultimately did. And That, as we all agree, the reason is because they're so hard to write, because you're going to screw up the details at some point. You will. You absolutely will.
Was this a zigzag?
No, Zigzag. That was the one that was
A
told
story
in
told
reverse
backward.
order.
Yeah.
This I forget the title. And Kevin Nealon was the star
yeah.
of the episode, and it was a time loop episode. You know,
Oh yeah, yeah.
it was that kind of thing. But it was. I remember when Lorraine pitched the idea at me, and just there was a look. It looked like, wait a minute, you're pitching me the thing that we should never do. Yeah, so let's do it. But you know, Lorraine was great fun that way. He wasn't married to the dogma,
No.
but
no.
he was. The thing about that room, that writer's room, that was when you went to pitch a story, the logic had to line up. You know, working a sci-fi audience they're really tough, because the science, you know, there's the logic of the science, and you got to make all the logic work out. And if the logic falls apart, then the whole thing falls apart. And not only are you worried about just the drama itself, but you have to worry about the logic of the science making sense, so that you don't trip all over yourself. This was your first time writing science fiction, and you went on to write a lot of it afterwards.
Yeah. Yeah, because the pigeonhole process is whatever you did last tends to be what is assumed to be your only proficiency.
So that was less a choice and more suddenly a pigeonholing.
A bit of both, because you follow the work offer. So I would say it's a bit of both. I didn't mind that particular pigeonhole because it was kind to me.
You did some time on Jeremiah with J. Michael.
Yeah.
I have an unpleasant memory of him. I'm sure yours are more pleasant.
I have very complicated feelings. He is a very complicated and remarkable person, and someone who does not let the world inside very easily. I've never experienced or been in the presence of a writer who was so driven to write that it was almost like he would expire if he didn't stay up all night and write. He exhaled and the script was there. I've never seen that before. I've seen fast writers. I mean, David Kelly could churn them out, but he was remarkable. And he was a one-man show on scripts, on Babylon. On Jeremiah, he had to face the studio, actually insisted that he get someone to do it with him. So I went through an interview process, and he accepted me as a peer and was always relatively gracious. We had our bumps, but I was responsible for my episodes totally. He was responsible for his episodes. And that was a huge accommodation on his part, because he could just as easily, when I turned in a story, he rarely took it apart, except, a couple of times. So
I call him a control freak is an understatement.
Yes, but so he kept his control freak, and because of that, he did the serialized stories, and I did the one-offs. That gave me a certain amount of freedom. So working with him was like working with Klugman in a way, which is you knew who was completely in charge. He would call me and having seen my cut on a show, and was so kind and gracious that I can sum up without telling tales out of school. The shit only hit the fan when he fired my secretary. I don't care who you are in the business, that's not done. It's just not done. So that got us basically got us off track. I didn't choose to come back for season 2.
What a strange thing for him to do, period.
Yeah, there's a whole soap opera behind it, which isn't worth getting into, but suffice it to say, it was a real intrusion on someone who has gleefully been stepped on over the years without too much muss and fuss, but that was just shit. So that hurt our relationship, and he went on. And by the way, I don't think he had any other writer but himself on the next season. So proving that he can do it, but there wasn't a third season.
At the end of the day, you know, you can only do so much and it will suffer at some point. It is a collaborative process and it really does. Yeah, if you surrender to the collaborative process, you'd be amazed what other people can add to what you do.
Uh,
That yes and
Amen.
process is remarkable.
Amen. In fact, the very time that Glenn Larson had 7 shows on the air, Aaron Spelling had 6 maybe at the time, and certainly more. But Aaron Spelling had one spark of genius in it. He knew who to hire, and he didn't go into the editing room and fuck things up. Aaron Spelling was a master of hit shows because he got out of the way. And Glenn Larson, God rest his soul, could not get out of the way, spiritually and physically incapable.
Yeah, we've bumped into execs like that, haven't we all?
You know, I bumped into some of that, but mainly out of theater in New York. And maybe it's because of the way the theater is structured in terms of the writer's strengths and capabilities and power.
Mm-hmm.
That when they come to a more collaborative process, which is, you know, film and television, they have difficulty adjusting. Because in theater, it's so isolated in terms of you can't change a word of that script without the writer's acknowledgement and appreciating the change.
Mm-hmm.
And they have to make the change themselves.
Imagine that. Oh my God. What?
Yeah.
You went on, the next thing the big thing you did was another anthology, The Masters of Sci-Fi, which was a very cool show.
That was a total joy to do. So I talked about the highlights and the lowlights. That was perfection. We only did 6 episodes, sadly, but everything was a class act. Got to work with some wonderful people, and I tip my hat to Keith Addis, who brought me on to produce with him. That was just tremendous joy to work on that show.
Which episode stands out as your favorite?
My favorite episode was Sam Waterston playing a president who had a medically, in history, documented problem of only retaining his memory for 30 to 50 minutes, but having no recollection of his history. And he's constantly starting over. Anyway, it's about an apocalyptic event and the president who caused it. And it was a very powerful show. That really stood out for me.
From there you went on and you did V.
Right.
Another cool show, but was that as pleasurable an experience?
No.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was the classic intrusive network.
It was NBC, wasn't it?
No, ABC. Well, you know what? Wait. I'm thinking the original show was ABC. You know, this is 10 years back, and I can't.
That's right.
It was, I'm sorry, for sure, it was NBC. But then they started the blame game, firing executive producers, demoting executive producers, promoting the creator of the show over the executive producer, and then firing them both.
It's all about the politics. It's all the power play. Oh dear.
And it was the first bona fide case of ageism in my career, and I actually joined the lawsuit on behalf of the DGA with that experience, and it was a nasty blow, and they didn't really conceal it. So.
You did shows in Canada after that.
Yeah.
Mostly. Yeah. Did you move to Canada, more or less?
Never. If I were smart, I would have bought a condo on Outer Limits and kept it. We would have made out.
Because you work there constantly.
Yeah, but sometimes I would just see the show, like the shows in Toronto. I had a develop by credit on The Listener. I was there for 1 season, and then the network came back and they made a pickup, I felt, conditional upon my coming back. So I used that to really make stupid demands, mainly because I wanted to be blown out the door. It was like when I was a kid selling greatest books of the Western world door to door. The rule was, if you know you're not going to sell it, just blow yourself out the door. Say, hey, you want to buy some books? You'll get the door slammed in your face. Well, that's kind of what I was doing by making it but I still made a deal that was a consultant deal that was so expensive and didn't ask for a minimum that I kind of blew myself out. Anyway, the point is I was able to maintain a connection to the show, make some money, and not have to be in Canada full time. Obviously, I was there all but weekends on Outer Limits, but
yeah. That was yeah. If you didn't live there, that's a tough commute. That's
yeah.
a tough commute. Having done that a couple of times. The when we talked the other day, you said you got to a certain point and you decided you didn't have to put up with this shit anymore. What was the moment that suddenly made you walk away from TV?
Well, I had been growing disaffected in the past few years, and I kind of kept my involvement to consultancy and pilot development, sometimes with other writers and stuff. But the breaking point for me was a streaming series, my one and only foray into streaming, other than old shows that are streamed now. It was a really, really bad experience. In many ways, it was my own making. Because
What was the series called?
I'll tell you, and your audience, but I won't tell my friends that live near me or could possibly hear this. No, it was called Between. And it was the second year of a sci-fi show, and Netflix bought it or picked it up on the condition that I be attached after I did like a 10-page set of notes about what I would do with the series. There were 6 episodes committed for that second season. I said I would write all of them, which made sense to them because they wanted a completely new direction, which I had suggested. My idiot mistake was believing that I could do it by phoning it in, that I could somehow not be in the writer's room. I thought I could do all the outlines, hand it to them. They could do notes. I would get them back, write the scripts. It would be a piece of cake. No. And it's my own fault. From Netflix's point of view, I had full responsibility. But the truth was, the real show was being made in Toronto. The scripts were heavily rewritten, but I had to take responsibility. So roundabout after
So you would write scripts, they would go to Toronto, they'd be rewritten and come back to you, and this is what this is what you're making.
Honestly, it made sense on their part.
Yeah.
First of all, they had much younger people doing the show, which is I would have wanted there anyway, and I had at my disposal, but it just wasn't going to work out long distance. I got caught in I almost pulled it off. Before it finally came down to a network call where they said, "Who's in charge here?" And it was a long pause, and I kind of had to fess up to the reality of it. And at that point, the politics were crushing, and I gave up the back 3 scripts. I just said, "Please take these away. I don't want to write them." So that was and all in all, it left a really bad taste in my mouth, because it was not just the writer's lament about being screwed. It was that, but it was also about screwing yourself, which we're very good at. I don't, for some damn reason.
Been there, done that. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know.
Do you think the streamers have learned anything since that experience? I mean, they've been growing by leaps and bounds. There's more than ever going through streaming now, and more streamers out there. Do you think they've learned anything about that process?
I think when a show is going well, even if they've been integral to its development, that they would be wise to keep their hands off and not try to fire people and reinvent it and decide on cast changes mid-course, that kind of thing. I think that applies to hit shows. If it's a run-of-the-mill streaming show and you, I don't know enough about it from other than my own experience this one time, and it was
an unusual experience with the streaming model.
Right. It was an unusual experience. So it was a conspiracy of factors came together. I always used to say this, Alan, and I may have said it to you at once. When it's time for me to get booted out of the business, I want to have a big smile on my face. I always said that, but I didn't have a big smile.
I don't bet.
And I didn't, I booted myself out of the business, but I sure had some help.
Oh dear. Well, I'm sorry. I'm sorry to hear that. But you're much happier now.
Oh, yeah. There comes a time when,
Yeah.
and I've been doing little writing projects. I've off by myself and have a fantastic animated feature that I've got. I'd love to get into work at some point, but retirement is great.
But you're not dead yet.
No, I noticed that, but as soon as my first breath after retiring.
Yeah, it suddenly struck you in the face. Hey, you're not dead yet.
It's a good feeling.
You're creating a lot of art these days. I'm always liking it on social media.
Yeah. Yeah, that's been my passion. And I kind of have followed this sketch a day thing where I've tried to do a digital sketch or a pencil or ink sketch a day, which is admittedly oversharing and not, you might say, why don't you edit yourself a little bit and do once a week? But, it's fun. And, I don't have a huge audience. I don't have to be beholden. So I'm kind of beholden to myself and challenging myself.
Oh, hey, it's the best thing you can do, doing this podcast, the work involved in doing it every week is taxing, but I personally, I love producing work.
Because you have the reins. You're not being told what to do. Except by Gil, maybe.
But these are old habits. They
Right.
they die hard. It's still that I love that, to be putting out work. I think that's a glorious thing. And there's you put out work because you put out work. I blog post most days on top of everything else because put out work. I believe that's the best revenge I can have on this world is to keep putting out work.
Oh, absolutely. And to have fun at the same time is a gift, right?
Oh,
Absolutely.
Glorioski.
Totally.
Over the course of your career, you've gone from the old model of TV when you were doing Quincy, to streaming, which is a completely different dynamic in virtually every way. Back when in the old days of TV, the whole model, the way nobody made any money on the upfront license fee. The only way you were going to make any money was if you got the syndication, right? That was it. So the whole business model was a show had to have, the magic number was 65. A 13-week ad cycle times 5 days a week on the strip, 65. So any idea you walked into, you were going to pitch any TV idea, it didn't matter what it was. The most important question was, are there 65 in it? And so it was, in essence, you were not going to do a series that had a serialized storyline because in syndication that was never going to work. People wouldn't necessarily watch it that way. So in essence, there might be hints of storyline over the course of a season, but that was neither here nor there. Each episode really was mostly a world unto itself, and
right.
So every idea that we would bring to the creative table, it had to be like a joke with 65 variations on the theme of its punchline.
That's right.
Not so today.
Pardon?
Not so today.
No. And this is I took the better part of 2 decades off on the sidelines, but coming back into a streaming world, I find exhilarating. The 65 dynamic was, I always found kind of crushing. Coming up with ideas where you could do it 65 times. God, that's, I don't know how anybody came up with an idea that worked 65 times.
Well, I think part of that is the audience. I think the audience wanted that. They wanted to see that 65 times. And I think
They still do. Hey, Dick Wolf.
I'm not so sure they want it anymore, but they want it faster than they want it. They'll take it in globs of 10, and then go for another 10.
Look at Poker Face right now, Natasha Lyonne. That is a traditional franchise, and people love it because it's a really, really good hook, and it's a really, really good actress.
When Gil and I did Tales from the Crypt, and our orders were 12, 13. And man, all right, if I look at our season, we would do on an order of 12 or 13, we would have 2, 3 top rate episodes, 2 or 3 that were great, 3 or 4 that were really, really good, a couple of mediocre ones, and then some stinkers. In an order of 12, there was just no way to get around it. It was just, we tried as hard as we could. On Outer Limits, I don't know how you felt, but the quality is not. It's not.
No, we had some real stinkers for sure.
Yeah. So, the crush, the crush of a 22 is, and again, the 22 is designed in part to get you to the 65 as efficiently as possible. In the fewest number of seasons. It's crushing to a creative staff. To put it out like it's a factory product.
The 65 show threshold. Having been on a show that I created that was 60, that did go 65 shows. It was one short of the trigger for my payday, which is sad. But,
oh no!
Oh yeah!
No!
And they knew that because they just made one less episode because it would have
fuckers. Fuckers.
Sad but true. That was Sweating Bullets, by the way. Which was the American title for Tropical Heat. Which, anyway, just a footnote back a ways.
Everything connects back. Everything connects back. The trick now is that you really can't start production on episode 1 until you have finished writing episode 10 on an order of 10,
right? Because
you might need to plant something right there in that first frame. So it's a whole other way of.
That's right.
Of thinking of the product. The imagining a season. I mean, I really, now Gil and I are about to take out a show. Well, it's called Are You Afraid? We're not afraid of telling anyone. The process of imagining a 10 episode season that is one story with each episode has got to stand on its own in some way, but it's all telling this whole story. I found in thinking of this big story really satisfying.
Mm-hmm. I mean, obviously you would do well to have your 10 scripts and ready to go, or at least 10 stories that sure. Everybody has approved of it. But there's also something to be said for the Charles Dickens approach, which is you write yourself into a corner and you write yourself out of it. So the networks don't like that, and nor did they let you very often. But if you have some leeway, you can plant the Easter eggs where you need to, and also come up with something that you never expected in episode 8 that now makes perfect sense. So your point about this holistic approach to storytelling, I completely agree with. And that's really would have made television better in its infancy.
When we were doing those shows, and you you had an order for, let's say, the front order was 12 or 14, and then they gave you the back order later. You never really started with having more than a few shows ready and written,
Right.
and invariably they would catch up with you, and you would be writing to camera sometimes in a really pinch, in a bad situation, and so that was the worst situation to be in, because you just you didn't want to be in that place where you were writing to camera. Now it seems to have gone just the opposite way, where now they want to see and know everything before they shoot 1 foot of film. It makes it in one level a little easier in terms of the production to accommodate as well as they can the writing, because they have advance warning and knowledge. But on the other hand, sometimes, as you say, you're not getting the best because you're not thinking on your feet, which sometimes is the best way to think.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point.
So, but that's where the world of the streamer is. That's exactly where it is. You need to tell them everything, and you need to have done all the work. That's the part that I don't like so much. You need to have done all the work.
What you're saying is, just taking the show out, you feel the need to have how much in place before you do?
Well, I think
are you taking out scripts or just concepts?
No, we think
a combination of the two.
Take out a script, and I think you need to have like 9 paragraphs on the other 9 episodes if you're looking for an order of 10, so that they can see the trail of where the show is going, how the characters are being manipulated, good and bad, and so that they get a sense of where they're going to wind up at the end of the day. I think they need all that stuff these days because they're being very spoiled by being offered more and more and more information.
It gets harder, it gets easier, it gets harder. One last question, Sam. What is it about Art Deco lamps that turns you on?
I have so many obsessions that it's embarrassing, but Art Deco is kind of really at the heart of my soul.
Huh.
And it goes way back, and I remember every piece I've ever bought and how much I paid for it and what its history is, and I can't sell any of them, and so I'm a high-end hoarder. Anyway, I love Art Deco. It's timeless, although AI is taking it over along with everything else. That's my last complaint from a whiny writer.
There you go. Thank you so much for doing this with us, Sam. Really and truly,
I enjoyed it tremendously.
This was an hour.
You did. We did too.
Good.
We really did.
I feel like we've toured television history.
Yeah, I think of it as 40 years wandering in the desert myself. But
something. But the Holy Land's in sight.
Before we end, Alan, you said we were going to talk about that last episode that he wrote about his family.
Oh yes. Oh yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Of course. Thank you for.
Sorry, Sam. We need another couple of minutes.
All right. Yeah. So we're not done yet.
You don't have to belabor it, but
no. That was one of the first year was the first year, wasn't the second. Yeah, the first year. Yeah, it was called Tribunal.
Mm-hmm.
Was it? I think Saul Rubinek is the lead, isn't he? Yeah. It's a great episode. What was it like? All right. Was that the first time you had written about that thing?
No, it's interesting you ask. I had written a really good episode of Quincy, also based on my father's. The Outer Limits was based on my father's many stories over the years, and the first one called Stolen Tears, a Quincy episode with Martin Balsam, about a Holocaust denier and a Nazi war criminal, all tied up in a murder case. The Tribunal was the piece of work I'm most proud of anything I've done.
I'm so glad you reminded me, Gil. Good God, that would have been. Who directed it? It was Mario.
Mario as a party.
How you were happy with his vision for?
Oh, I was, and I had a real conversation with him beforehand. I know that he's very cognizant of the Middle East and has very strong feelings about Palestine and all that. And so I just said, you can't be halfway on this script. You'd have to throw yourself into it. And I need to know whether you can without betraying your own sensibilities. So he said, I absolutely can. And I trusted him, and I'm so glad I did.
Yeah, that was one of the most interesting aspects of the episode was the dynamic of the director.
Yeah, yeah. And my father came up, was a consultant on the details of Auschwitz. And I don't know if you know, but he actually put on a uniform, the prisoner's garb, and took pictures with the Nazi who was the tormentor in the show.
Yeah.
And because it gave him power for the first time over, and he felt so empowered by that. And it's a startling image. I'll send you a pic sometime.
I remember that now as you talk about it, just the, on the set those days and the recreating those scenes was not easy.
No, not from a production point of view or an emotional point of view.
No. It was. I remember feeling strange about it myself. Not that we were doing it, but and I have no direct connection to it other than culturally, and yet it doesn't fail to create. There's a feeling inside your gut that's not like anything else.
Yeah. I just wish every writer has the ability to find something, whether it is produced or not, that makes you feel like, oh, that's why I've been gifted with this. And
you had accomplished what you were put here to do.
Yeah. Although I don't want to sound fatalistic about it, because maybe there's something else I was intended to do.
That would be the final
later.
question. You're still writing stuff. You've got your animated show, if you want to talk about that, but
No,
what still remains to be written?
I've never felt a burning need to write. I didn't know, as I told you, I didn't know I was going to be a writer until a year or two after I started. It didn't, well up inside of me, but once you were able to enjoy the collaborative creative process and work with good people and see ideas. The thing about the movie business, you both know, is that the difficulty of mounting the effort, so it's all in the mix when you think about these things.
Ultimately, yes, that is exactly right. All right, now thank you, Sam.
You're more than welcome.
Wait a minute, Alan. What about that story when he was 4 years old?
Hey,
no, never mind.
We all live in rewrites, as we know.
Oh yes.
I don't know why we even call it writing. We should just call it rewriting to begin with.
Yeah, I'll be rewriting this interview almost instantly after we hang up.
There you go. Hey, the nice thing about this medium is that you actually can rewrite it again and again and again. It's quite nice in that way. It never has to be finished. It's the best toy a writer could ever have and the worst toy a writer could ever have. It never has to be done. But this one is.
Okay.
And thank you again, Sam, for talking to us. And thank you. Thank you as always, everybody. We'll see you next time. The How Not to Make a Movie podcast is executive produced by me, Alan Katz, by Gil Adler, and by Jason Stein. Our artwork was done by the amazing Jody Webster, and Jason Jody, along with Mando, are all the hosts of the fun and informative Dads from the Crypt podcast. Follow them for what my old pal the Crypt Keeper would have called terrific crypt content.